Hello, and everybody, and welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strick and Roll. I'm your host, Shwin. This is episode 34. I'm joined today by a first-time guest who I'm sure many already know who he is. His name is Jake Fischer. He is the senior NBA reporter for Yahoo Sports. He is the co-host or host for the No Cap Room Show on the Ball Don't Lie podcast, and he also has written a book called Built to Lose: How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever. Check that out. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for giving that long introduction. I appreciate it, man. I'm good. I'm at a friend's place in Santa Monica.
Nice.
And we're in LA for a week. I have a wedding to go to in Santa Barbara on Sunday. So
man, the trade deadline passes and you're just out here jet setting, huh?
Kind of. It has been a bit of a interesting space now. This being my first season at Yahoo and trying to figure out like what to do coverage wise post deadline, because you can't just rumor monger for 6 months straight. Now I've got more opportunities to tell some stories and stuff like Immanuel Quickley. So here we are.
Yeah, and I mean, he must have known that you were going to come on today because he decided to score 40 points last night to give us something to talk about. But I actually wanted to talk about a bit of this article you wrote, PCS last week that dropped about Quickley and kind of his Sixth Man of the Year campaign that's going on. Not that that's the entirety of the piece, but I wanted to talk about a couple of things in here that you mentioned. The first was, and this was a quote that caught, I don't know, it caused a lot of people to like get very, I don't want to say anxious, I guess you could say on Knicks Twitter, though Knicks Twitter is generally ready to be anxious about something. I'm just going to read out the quote. Where is it? Here we go. It's about the sixth man thing. Okay, here it is. He calls himself, so he says, there's one sheet covered top to bottom with sixth man of the year. There's another piece of paper, though, lined with I'm a starting point guard over and over and over again. And then he goes on to talk about in this, he also has a quote in here. I don't want that to be what this is, Quickley said. I don't want everybody to think I just want to be a microwave guy. I don't want to give that impression for my career because eventually I want to be a starter down the line. You don't work your whole life to, but I'll do whatever the team needs me to do. It's about winning at the end of the day. I'm just curious. Obviously, it's a quote, so I don't have no idea what his body language is like there. I mean, yeah. Did you get the sense that he's frustrated by not starting, or do you think that's like kind of a competitor having some chip on his shoulder, a goal that he just has set forth for him that he's working towards, and it's not as much of an immediate concern as it might be something he's hoping to achieve down the line?
I would not say he's frustrated. I wouldn't say it's an immediate concern. I was trying to ask him basically if he preferred right now on this team in this moment, if he preferred starting or if he preferred coming off the bench, because from a starter's perspective, he was explaining to me, I don't think I put it in the piece, but he was explaining to me that when he starts, his approach is, I got to be a table setter. I have to get, Julius look here. I have to throw Mitch a lob. I have to make sure that he calls him QG, gets a open look on the wing. But when he comes off the bench, he's just hair on fire, running around, trying to make stuff happen. So I was kind of trying to see if maybe he was enjoying the bench role a bit more right now. Kind of like, the analogy comes to mind off the top of my head is like kind of like when you're in high school and college and like as a regular human being, not a basketball player, there's no pressure in life. Like you can just run around and gallivant and be you and find yourself, as opposed to like having responsibility for other people around you and dependence and so forth. So I said to him, like, it kind of seems like you enjoy being that microwave guy. And then he said, no, I want to stop you right there. Like, I do, but I don't want that to be the case for my whole career. And then again, like, he's only 23, and we talked about that too. He's only 23. He's only in his third year. He was a late first-round pick. Like, he wasn't really, someone who was expected to come in and immediately get handed the keys to an offense. So I think he's very content in the fact that this is where he's at right now. I think it's just something that he's looking to do later on in his career, especially because Kentucky, he started off as a bench player there too and worked his way into the starting lineup and use that as like a thing to work for and something to like he gave himself kind of like a carrot dangling, like it wasn't someone else motivating him, it was himself. So I think the biggest thing with that imagery of him writing stuff down in his notebook is more telling about how he sets his goals and kind of is envisioning what he wants to accomplish than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. I thought it was like kind of weird how people ran with that and were like, "Well, this is why. Like, should we have signed Brunson? What's the like? Can they coexist?" And I don't know. I get the sense that when I've seen them on the court, they seem to have a good relationship. Off the court as well, like that they play well together and that they enjoy playing with each other. I mean, I don't know. I don't think you got a quote from Brunson in the piece or anything, but did you touch on anything about his relationship with Brunson while you were talking to him?
I didn't talk to Brunson for it. He definitely, they have a good connection. I think it's pretty obvious when you see that whole stuff with the shoe going on first. That was happening the day I went to the practice facility.
Yeah.
And I mean, Quickley is just such a fun-loving dude. Like, even, I started the story talking about like the dance in his step, because I think that's the most unique thing about his game is how he's out there like he's on, a ballet stage, and he's shimmying and jumping up and down and, wagging his braids back and forth. But even like as he walked down the practice facility that morning when I went out to White Plains to meet him, like just walking down the facility, he has like a groove in his gait, and he's just someone who I think it'd be hard for him to really get frustrated with anybody in the situation. I feel like he's someone who is a glue guy type of person. I think he's got that personality that he loves his teammates. It seems like he really loves the coaching staff. I mean, he raved about everyone he's worked with there. So I think the Brunson fit in the backcourt is something that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on if that starting conversation does come into the fold at a certain point in time. Because Brunson's obviously the guy. Like, he's obviously got the keys, and he's got the familial connections to, make that be ironclad. But every Knicks fan knows the fact that they close games together and they have a lot of success doing that. I don't think there's anything like any cause for concern or anything really to ruffle or poke and pry at the relationship between those two guys.
Yeah, I mean, Quickley's got World Wide West up in the front office, though, so he's doing okay for himself, too. I did want to ask, so obviously you were on the team. I think this was this probably before they went on their little 3-game losing streak?
I talked to him. It was a Friday before the Knicks Nuggets game.
Okay, yeah, so they were still they were. I think they'd won a couple in a row at that point. Obviously, there was last week. There was, they play Orlando, and there's an incident between Quickley and Randle. There was a report yesterday, I want to say, I think it was the Post about Berman came out of his sabbatical and graced us again with some information. But he he said like not that it's some huge crisis in the locker room, and Begley talked about this too, but like maybe there are some things that are maybe have come to a head, some issues in the locker room, right? I don't think it was like a huge crisis again, but have you heard anything of that to that extent, or do you think it's just kind of like it's a long season, sometimes shit happens?
I think it's a long season, and I talked to Randle around the All-Star break, or at the All-Star break, and he was so light. There was like a lightness to him that was really obvious, and I haven't necessarily seen that so consistently post All-Star. I don't know what the reasoning is, but something has seemed to change a bit in at least his presence and his constitution when he's around, when he's on the court. I mean, maybe it's the long year, maybe it's the fact that he's had some shooting struggles here and there. I don't know. I mean, he put up 50 whatever against the Nuggets, and things were great that night, right? So I mean, we're at this part of the season too where I'm here in LA. I was at the Clippers Bulls game last night, and people from both teams said to me something to the effect of, and I keep hearing this over and over again, that this year being so wired tight from both conferences, basically the 4 seed on down, it's created a lot of pressure and tension that doesn't typically exist at this part of the regular season for this many teams. If there's 20 teams right now that are really battling for their playoff lives or their positioning to get out of the play-in tournament, and I think that's cast a bit of unforeseen circumstances on a lot of teams that I think are just it's a long year, man. Like this has been my first season since the pandemic where I've actually been going to games again and sitting down with people and like I'm tired, and I don't play the games. I just talk to people and go to my room and write. So I get it. I understand why there'd be some type of fatigue and how tempers can flare, but there's nothing I've heard that I'd be like majorly concerned if I'm a Knicks fan.
I just wanted to say I'm surprised you didn't make it a point to talk to Brunson so you guys could commiserate about the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean Brunson was talking to the media while I was sitting down quickly,
Okay.
so it didn't exactly work out timing wise. But he probably doesn't remember, but when I was in 4th grade, I believe, and he was in 2nd grade, and still in the Philadelphia area, Brunson and I played on the same Sixers camp, summer camp team. So there's that Philly connection for you.
Yeah, I'm sure you gave him buckets. So I did want to go back. I believe around the trade deadline, there was reporting of interest in OG Anunoby. Like, did the Knicks ever make a firm offer there, or was that more just like they had a conversation?
It's so hard to parse out what was a formal offer or what's just a conversation. But they definitely were in talks, and they definitely, I think, were one of the few teams that were really involved. I don't know how close it definitively got at the end. I don't think any team really gave the Raptors the picks that they were looking for, in terms of I see Jonathan Macri on Twitter every day wondering if the Mavericks pick's even going to convey. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of interesting circumstances for the Knicks particular pick package, where they're either far in the future or you don't know exactly what the conveyance is going to be, especially with where OKC kind of is now. And like the Pacers had 3 picks to offer, but they're all in this year's draft. And like, what does Toronto need with like Memphis's pick and Milwaukee's or Cleveland's pick? So I don't think Toronto got like the 3 picks that they were really wanting from anyone. Like the quality of pick and the player that Toronto was in search for. I don't think anyone got close, which is why OG Anunoby is still there. But the Knicks were definitely a team that was involved, checking in, and trade deadline conversations. I always say this: they can come up again back in this, or when the summer comes around, when the draft comes around, when free agency comes around. So I wouldn't necessarily take OG Anunoby off the table if I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm also not saying like, start preparing for him to land and play at Madison Square Garden next year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that vein, this has been. I mean, you just mentioned it, and I've seen other people talk about this, where like a lot of trade deadline discussion can be setting the table to maybe have a conversation later in the summer or whatever. So the Knicks obviously they go out and they get Josh Hart, who's been a really nice addition to the team. Do you view that as something like, well, if they got Josh Hart, maybe they're not going to be interested in OG Anunoby moving forward? Or do you think that those are 2 separate transactions entirely?
I think it's possible they could potentially eliminate each other, but I mean, New York has these picks to go buy and to go make this team better. I mean, that's clear. I think they wanted Josh Hart. I think he was available at a price they deemed decent, and he's Jalen Brunson's best friend from Villanova, and he's been a fantastic fit. He wants to stay in New York long term. He's represented by CEA, where there's a lot of obviously relationships with the Knicks front office, where I'm sure there won't be much struggle in re-signing him. But the Knicks are going to be looking to buy and to get better and to improve this summer and beyond. So if they find, I think that's also a thing to keep an eye on too, where you talk about OG and the price. Like if that's the price for OG and you have these picks, like if someone else becomes available that you think is maybe a little bit more worthwhile of that price point, I think that's also maybe a feather in other teams' cap against Toronto. Like, well, we don't have to move him now. Like the reason why OG has become such an interesting trade target is the fact that he's extension eligible, but he can't sign for anything more than 120% of his raises of his current salary until next offseason when he becomes a free agent. It's very similar to the DeJounte Murray situation, who's also represented by Clutch Sports, where the Spurs traded him last summer 2 years ahead of his free agency because they knew they weren't going to be able to, prevent him from testing the open market. They knew he was going to want money that they probably didn't think he was going to be worth. With Toronto, I don't know what they value OG at monetarily, but there's a real thought that he could just walk if he touched the open market in 2024. So if that's the case, same thing with Jeremy Grant going to Portland after Detroit. If that's the case, there's still going to be plenty of motivation, I think, for Toronto to explore his trade value this summer. And being that, I'm sure that was a calculus in a lot of team front offices that, well, this is what your price is now. If we're close or if we're not quite there, his value isn't going to go exponentially higher. Your asking price can't really change too much between February and June, July, especially where Toronto isn't. Like, they're not making a conference. If they make a conference finals run, I'll be pretty surprised. Maybe they do. The Jakob Poeltl addition's been great for their defense.
Yeah.
But I think that context is very important in that, you've kind of laid the groundwork for this summer, and you can see there's all the talk. There's already starting to be the talk that Damian Lillard could become available. Like, I don't know how serious that is, but just the fact that that's out there, there are going to be potential players that reach the open market that might have a higher value, higher ceiling than OG Anunoby.
Well, yeah, like Jaylen Brown obviously has made it a storyline himself this last couple of weeks. So yeah, there are definitely guys out there. I wanted to go back again to the trade deadline. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there was this random rumor that came out about like RJ Barrett to the Bulls for Zach Lavine and some kind of deal. And I believe that day you said that you hadn't heard any of that and that was not a real conversation. Is that, again, just correct me if I'm wrong, or does that just not something that you had heard, or is it something that maybe they had a discussion, but it was not serious at all?
Yeah, I was told the Knicks called and said, "Hey, what's up with Zach?" And that was pretty much it. I don't think there was any real traction there. The Bulls were swatting away offers left and right for all their guys. They even, from what I was told from multiple teams, they even started to up their ante asking price for Andre Drummond as things got down to the wire. And they were the only team to not make a trade, right? So I don't think the Bulls had really any serious trade talks with anybody, honestly, especially for Zach. Zach's been, we've seen it the last couple of weeks as the Bulls kind of reemerge into the play-in picture. He's been phenomenal. He's been their lifeblood. He was the reason why they went out and signed and traded for Lonzo Ball and added DeMar and made the move for Vucevic. They wanted to build this thing around him. I'd be really surprised if they really took a look at moving him here unless they got a sudden, direction from ownership. Like, this is what we want to do. We want you to go into a rebuilding phase. And I don't think that's what the Bulls have any intention of doing. If they did, they probably would have looked at, this trade deadline a lot more aggressively. It really seems like they're just trying to build out a perennial playoff contender with the Bulls.
Yeah. They're a very interesting team to me. But yeah, you're right. Zach Lavine has really looked a lot better the last couple of weeks. And if anything else, even if they did want to trade him, they were probably right to hold on to him because he did not have a great start to the season. He was obviously still recovering from his knee surgery. So, now he's playing a lot better. He's surging really to close the season. You would imagine that if they do eventually want to trade him in the summer, they're dealing now from a stronger position than they would have been at the trade deadline. I guess, there's all this smoke about I watched the Rockets last night. Okay, they played the Knicks. I've watched enough of the Rockets this year. They're pretty fucking bad. Okay, that's all I can say. And there's all this, but there's still this smoke of Harden. He's got this connection to Houston, and he loves Houston, and he still has a lot of ties down there, business wise, philanthropy wise, whatever. it seems crazy to me because Philly, obviously, they've really surged after an uneven start to the season. I mean, is that just smoke? Like, is that Harden? Like, he has to have another team out there, a suitor out there, so that he can get what he wants from Philly? Or do you think that's real?
There's definitely a lot of smoke. I don't know if it's real. I'm trying to figure it out on a week-to-week basis, but it seems like it is. I mean, we're going to find out on June 30th or July 1st, whenever whenever it actually comes down, if it's real or not. But I mean, people around Harden, people around Houston, people around Philly, people around Brooklyn, they keep talking about it. His family, a lot of his family still lives down there. He makes every opportunity to go down to Houston happen. He stuck around in Houston after the Sixers when they played there. I forget exactly when that was, but he stuck around and went out for little baby's birthday. The guy loves Houston, and I think it's a real possibility. I also think it's a real possibility. It's just a leverage play. There are definitely people in Philadelphia who believe and are hoping that it's a leverage play, because you're right. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense at all from a winning perspective. But at a certain point, maybe that's not what matters to James Harden. Maybe, I mean, who could fault someone for deciding to take like a 5-year, $200+ million contract to just go hang out in a warm weather city where you're treated like a king and there are no expectations for you other than just putting up numbers. Like,
well, I think
I've kind of compared it to like him being a New York Jew and retiring in Boca Raton. You know what I mean? Like, if that's what he wants to do, I don't think anyone could really fault him for it. It's just, it doesn't make much sense from a competitive standpoint. But I mean, the Rockets do have a clear goal of getting better for next season. I think there's a lot of expectation around the league that whether it's Harden or other people, they're going to be very aggressive with their cap space to try to get better this offseason. And there's a thought that even with, how discombobulated their schemes and structure have been, with a top lottery pick and a couple free agent additions, they seem to think there'll be a real chance there. And everyone's expecting a coaching change there too. I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see.
And I guess, follow up, obviously. Well, one thing you said mentioned about Harden, like he did have a quote, I think, about leaving Brooklyn where he talked about like, he was talking about how there's all this off-court drama there. And he's like, that's not what I'm about. I don't care about that. I just want to have fun playing basketball. And like, you're right. It could just be that simple. It could just be like, yeah, winning is great, but I just want to play ball and live in Houston. Like, that's totally reasonable. But like, one, I would imagine that some of his decision would be tied to how they perform in the playoffs this year. And then I guess, like if Harden did decide, hey, you know what, I'm out. What do you like? Embiid has kind of, he's labeled himself, right, as the process. He's embraced that city. I think he's embraced a lot of that. Is that like he comes into play then, you think, or do you feel like he's just happy in Philly?
I don't know. And I think, it's a scenario that rival executives are definitely looking at and circling and monitoring and hoping that becomes the case. But I was just talking to someone with the Clippers about this last night. These players don't know. James Harden doesn't know what he's going to do right now. Unless he does, I mean, I'd be surprised. Like, even with like LeBron going back to Cleveland in 2014, there was all this thought and speculation that that's where he was obviously leaning towards. And if you gave LeBron true serum, I don't think he had decided that he was going to Cleveland before that playoff run. Like, these guys are guys. They're human beings. They have emotions and they have insecurities and they have just, pressure to perform for what they believe outside expectations are versus people in their circle and all that type of stuff, where not all this stuff is so premeditated like I think fans want to believe. And the whole thought of like, oh, Harden's going to Houston. And so Embiid's going to want out, and he's going to want to go to the Knicks because he's CAA and Leon Rose used to be his agent. Like, I get that. I totally get that.
I'm sure
But
Leon Rose would love to reunite with Joel Embiid.
I'm sure he would. Like, Joel Embiid has been in Philadelphia his entire career, where he came there after, a whirlwind couple of years moving from Cameroon to Florida to Lawrence, Kansas, excuse me. And then his brother died his rookie year, and Philadelphia has become his home, where he's got a family now and a baby. And I mean, if he just wants to stick in Philly, regardless of, what happens with Harden, like, I wouldn't be surprised there either. I mean, him and Daryl Morey have a really good relationship. When I went down to Philly to talk to Embiid, I guess that was in November or late October, I don't remember. But like right after we talked, right, like outside the exit of the practice facility, like he immediately went into Daryl's office and they started chatting about, who knows what. Like they're very, very in sync there. So it's possible. I mean, all this stuff is possible, but like you said about how the postseason will end up impacting maybe James's decision or Joel's decision, I think that's going to be a case across the league. Like there's so many teams that have high expectations here. I mean, if the Knicks don't get out of the first round, you're going to be disappointed. New York's going to be disappointed. If Boston, Milwaukee, or Philly, by definition, not all the three of those teams can get to the Eastern Conference Finals. You look at the Western Conference, like Denver and the Clippers and Phoenix. Like there's so much going on with all these teams, and we can just keep going down the list of. I mean, Dallas, so they don't even make the play-in picture. Like, what are they going to do? So there's a lot that's still to be determined. I think the postseason outcome will certainly have a lot to do and a lot to weigh on what those decisions are for a lot of these guys. But when a lot of guys say, I'm just focused on the season right now, I can't think about next year, like I do believe a lot of them, because there's just game after game after game. And if you get caught up thinking about what could happen in July, like you're not going to be present enough now to put yourself in the position to get paid the most or to have the best trade value. Then like it really is a league where you have to stay focused on the moment and where your feet are. And we'll come to that stuff when we come to that stuff.
Yeah. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. I know you had to get out of here. Real quick, do you think Immanuel Quickley signs an extension with the Knicks this summer?
I'm starting to lean towards no. This is just an educated guess, because everyone I've talked to in the league since that story's come out, they love Immanuel Quickley. And I'd be surprised if the Knicks and Quickley can come to a number that they both agree upon with the whole context of the cap rising now. I could be wrong. I mean, I have no idea. This is just an educated guess. But I believe he wants to stay with the Knicks. I believe the Knicks want to keep him. So we'll see if they can come to the table and make something happen.
All right, awesome, Jake. Thank you so much. Let the people know where they can find you, and plug anything you'd like to plug.
Yahoo Sports. Check out the new Ball Don't Lie podcast. That's the big thing to come plug. We got Vinny Goodwill's show on Mondays. The Good Word with Goodwill, and we have No Cap Room with myself and Dan Devine every Thursday. So that's about it.
Awesome. I have nothing to plug myself, so I'll just plug all the wonderful work that we do at the Strickland and Jake's book. Check that out. It's a good one. That is our pod for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and I will see you on Friday.
Thanks, man.